Military historians celebrate the Sherman, revere the T-34, and fear the Tiger. But there's one World War II tank so spectacularly inadequate that Allied soldiers actually felt guilty destroying it. The Japanese Type 94 tankette wasn't just bad. It was so pathetically outclassed that American Marines started calling engagements against it turkey shoots. Here's the shocking story of how Japan built a tank so terrible it became a war crime to use it. Let's shatter the biggest myth right now. Japan didn't fail at tank design because they lacked industrial capacity or technical knowledge. They built the Type 94 tankette knowing exactly how inadequate it was. Japanese military doctrine deliberately sacrificed armor protection, firepower, and crew survival for one thing: mass production of cheap, expendable vehicles. They literally designed a suicide machine and called it a tank. The numbers reveal the true horror of Japanese tank warfare. The Type 94 weighed just 3.5 tons, less than a modern pickup truck. Its armor was 6 millimeters thick at maximum, thinner than a standard car door. American Springfield rifles could penetrate Type 94 armor at 300 yards. Not anti-tank rifles, regular infantry rifles. Japanese tankers were essentially driving around in steel coffins that any Allied soldier could puncture with standard ammunition. But here's where it gets interesting. The weapon that actually made Allied soldiers feel sorry wasn't the tank's pathetic armor. It was its armament. The Type 94's main gun was a 6.5 millimeter machine gun. Not an anti-tank gun, not even a proper tank gun. A standard infantry machine gun mounted in a turret. American tank crews reported that Type 94s couldn't penetrate Sherman armor even at point-blank range. They were literally firing mosquito bites at elephants. A Marine veteran from Saipan captured the psychological impact perfectly. The first time we encountered those little Japanese tanks, we thought it was some kind of joke. They looked like toys. Then we realized there were actual human beings inside those death traps, and it stopped being funny real quick. Killing those things felt like murder, not combat. The brutal mathematics of Type 94 combat were staggering. American after-action reports show that the average Type 94 survived less than 90 seconds in direct contact with Allied forces. 90 seconds. Most were destroyed by infantry weapons, bazookas, anti-tank rifles, even grenades. Tank versus tank engagements lasted an average of 12 seconds before the Type 94 was completely eliminated. Now, let's talk about the tactical reality that made these machines so tragic. Japanese commanders knew the Type 94 was hopeless against Allied armor, but they used them anyway, in desperate banzai charges that accomplished nothing except the certain death of their crews. A captured Japanese tank manual grimly instructed, "The Type 94's mission is to absorb enemy fire and die gloriously. Expect no survival. Prepare for honorable death." But perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect was the crew training. Japan assigned their youngest, least experienced tankers to Type 94 units. These weren't elite panzer aces. They were teenagers with minimal training, sent into hopeless battles in vehicles that couldn't protect them. Allied intelligence reports noted that most Type 94 crews had less than 20 hours of actual tank operation experience before being sent into combat. The production numbers tell the complete story of Japanese desperation. Japan manufactured over 800 Type 94 tankettes, knowing full well they were death traps. Compare that to their production of medium tanks, fewer than 200. They chose quantity over survivability, condemning hundreds of young soldiers to certain death in machines that were obsolete before they left the factory. American tank commanders developed specific protocols for dealing with Type 94 encounters. Standard operating procedure was to disable the vehicle first, then demand surrender, rather than immediately killing the crew. A Sherman commander wrote in his diary, Orders came down to try to save the Japanese boys in those tin cans if possible. Command figured they'd suffered enough just being assigned to those things. The final darkest truth about the Type 94? It was actually effective. Not as a tank, but as a psychological weapon against Allied forces. American and Australian soldiers reported feeling demoralized after destroying Type 94 formations, not because of tactical difficulty, but because of the obvious desperation and futility of Japanese resistance. One weapon system had turned combat into something that felt like assisted suicide. A Japanese tank veteran who survived the war, an extremely rare occurrence for Type 94 crews, summed up the tragedy. We called them moving graves. Everyone knew getting assigned to a Type 94 unit was a death sentence. But orders were orders, and honor demanded we die trying. Looking back, I think the Americans understood our situation better than our own commanders did. Here's the brutal mathematics that defined Pacific tank warfare. The Type 94 represented everything wrong with desperate military thinking. Cheap production over crew protection. Quantity over quality. Symbolic resistance over tactical effectiveness. The result was a weapon so inadequate it made enemies feel guilty for using their superior equipment against it. Modern military doctrine emphasizes force protection and crew survivability precisely because of lessons learned from tragedies like the Type 94. War isn't about glorious death in hopeless causes. It's about building weapons that give your soldiers a fighting chance to complete their mission and come home alive. The Type 94 tankette stands as a permanent reminder of what happens when military leaders prioritize political symbolism over the lives of the young soldiers they send into battle.